Welcome to another episode of Books with Beste. Today I'm joined with David Cooks, author of Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose. Thanks for being here today.
It is my pleasure to be with you today. And I think what you're doing is a great idea, and I'm just excited to be included in it. So let's get going.
Awesome. So first question I always start off with all the authors is why'd you write this book?
Well, I wrote this book at a time in my life when I was transitioning from a career in education, and that was coming to an end. And I wasn't sure exactly what my next assignment would be or what the next thing was that I was going to do. But I was pretty confident it was going to be a book. And so I sat down, and when it was time to start writing that book, I was inspired to just begin to take people down my journey or along my journey from, suffering a spinal aneurysm at the age of 15 all the way to my present day, and some of the stops in between. And the hope when I wrote the book was that whoever read it would be inspired to continue to pursue their dreams in spite of difficulty. There's obviously a basketball piece in there because basketball has been an important part of my life that has helped me transition from various stages. And in this day and age, we call it pivoting. And so I was able to do a lot of that. So that's kind of why I wrote the book. I didn't have an audience in mind, but I did have a goal, and that was to touch people's lives and hopefully inspire them to be the best version of themselves in whatever situation they're in.
Yeah, I love that. When I first read it, you read that the first couple chapters to get that backstory, and I just try to put myself in your shoes where I'm like, I don't necessarily know how I would have handled all that adversity. So can you kind of talk about like right away, like when you went through that spinal aneurysm and then, you find that out and you can't play basketball anymore, especially at like, freshman year in high school, how tough that's got to be and kind of how do you change, shifted your mindset and pivoted from that moment?
Yeah, well, it was it clearly was unexpected. So I didn't have any pregame plan or a practice plan that I could look at for how to deal with this. But I think that there's something about family, there's something about faith, and there's something about discipline. And these elements, I think, help everyone deal with things that are difficult in their lives. For me, I think one of the benefits, and I don't know if it's a benefit. Well, yeah, a benefit was that I was so young and that I hadn't been tainted by life yet. And so I always was optimistic, and I always thought things would work out for me. And I never thought otherwise. I actually thought I'd be walking by now and playing basketball anyway. And so the transition for me was really something that I didn't have to make on my own. And I think that's pretty important. We talk about teamwork all the time as coaches and how you work together to get things done. Outside of my family, I had a number of friends along the way that stayed with me through it all, and they helped me to navigate through all the nuances of what I had to do now. It changed my perspective on things when I began to see that there were others who were much worse off than I was, and it made me think about my situation differently. And I'm a big believer in how perspective drives performance in every area of life. So once I changed how I saw my situation as something that I could overcome, something I could not just handle, but overcome, that really was critical for me. Being a competitor, and you know what that's like as a coach and a basketball player, perseverance is the key. You know how basketball seasons can really become long, and there's this one point in the season where everybody's just like, "Oh man, how much more time do we have?" And so you've got to persevere. You can't quit. And then lastly, for me, I had partnerships. I had friends and family and others who wanted to see me succeed, wanted me to be successful. And so when I take those things we talked about, I reference family, faith, and discipline. But from a alliteration standpoint, I like to talk about perspective, perseverance, and partnerships. I would not have made it as far as I did on my own. I would have, as you know from the book, all along the way, there were people that gave me opportunities. And when I became paralyzed, my passion and love for the game did not become paralyzed. Neither did my purpose. I had to get redirected and rerouted on how to fulfill that. And so along the way, Mark Hogan, Tim Larkin, Coach K, Guy Rancourt, all these people provided opportunities in the midst of what I was going through to help me stay involved in the game that I love. And kudos to all the people along the way who helped me.
Yeah, I love that. And what I love about your story and what reading it does is like you talk about that perspective where like when you're in the hospital, you're like, wow, there are other people that have it worse than me. And like that really hits the reader because it's like I'm looking at your story saying like, wow, that's so much worse than what I'm going through.
That's
And
right.
so like I think it's incredible that you were able to like um have that perspective. But I love the what was it? Partnerships, perspective, and perseverance. Like I love that. And especially the partnerships I think with family are so important. Because when you're 15 years old and you kind of get hit with that, you talk about a mom and dad role is really important in your life there.
Oh, absolutely. I think that um, I'm not a big believer in self-made men or self-made women. I'm into help-made men and help-made women, and I think we all benefit to some degree from having a support system around us. It's unfortunate for those who do not, and sometimes they don't make it because of that. But I am just grateful for the partnerships, and partnerships aren't always easy. There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of humility that it takes to build those relationships, and but that's part of coaching too. We all get into the game for various reasons, and the thing I love most about coaching basketball, and that I miss now that I'm doing other things, is the relationships. It's those things that you build. And again, that's partnership. And to me, what good is life if you don't have someone to walk with you through it? And that can be in any situation. That's not just a marriage statement. That's for the journey from paralysis to purpose or whatever you're dealing with.
Yeah, and one of the lines, especially when we're on this topic of partnerships, that I like in the book is where you say, I know I would need to get more comfortable asking others for help when I needed it. And I think, obviously in your situation, people are like, well, yes, that makes sense. He has to ask for more help. But what I like about this story is that like it just highlights how if you take anybody's story, everybody has partnerships throughout the way. And like you said, nobody's a self-made man or woman. And it's like just to understand that perspective and that it's okay to ask for more help, depending on where you're at in your circumstances. I think that's really important, from reading this book.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that people are willing to help you. That's the amazing thing, is that sometimes we're afraid to ask because we don't know about the response that we're going to get. But I'm convinced that there's somebody assigned in the world somewhere to help you move forward in whatever your situation is. And so the sooner you can realize that, it helps to have people around that can help bear the burden. It's good to have some assistant coaches. I was a head coach, and it was good to have assistant coaches that could see things that I couldn't see, that could do things that I couldn't do, but helped us all collectively together. And we talk about coaching a lot, and coaches, they help you see the blind spots. They're blind because you can't see them. And so sometimes players don't know their abilities and skills, but coaches can point it out to them. And similarly, having partnerships with coaches and others in your lives, they can show you some things that you just can't see. And that's the benefit of that partnership, is that you get another set of eyes, you get another set of ears, you get another heart. You get another sense of compassion. That's all brought into that, and it helps develop you. So yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, that's been one of the most important areas of my life, being able to ask for help. I mean, and I'm independent. We're all created to be independent. And for me to go from walking to not walking, literally overnight, and having to understand that there are going to be some things I need to get some help with. Um, I mean, that was an interesting leap for me, but it also was out of necessity. And once I did become comfortable with that, I mean, I'll ask you for anything.
Yeah, and so I guess like what I think is really interesting is that you have so many interesting experiences, you know, with your work in the community, like and different doors that opened up, right? Where like if you were to have this adversity hit you and you just kind of shut down and go, oh, poor me, like, well, read the rest of the book. Like you still had like an incredible journey by just pivoting with, you know, the adversity. Could you kind of talk about maybe like how when you made that pivot, just maybe some of these experiences that like you don't know that they would have happened had you not faced this?
Absolutely. I'll go back to my very first job I got in high school. This is a couple years after after I had the aneurysm, and I was given a job at a bank, and I was a lockbox clerk, and that's someone who kind of files checks and does that type of work. Um, I didn't quite I didn't look at it that way. For me, it was a steam builder at that time, something I really needed. And I took much pride in that, which again goes back to what my parents always instilled in us about whatever you do, be the best at it. You be your best at it, whatever that might be. So I got that job. And one of my goals was to be a banker. And eventually I did that. I'm going to fast forward from that all the way to Duke University. And so I get to Duke University to get my MBA, and I want to be a part of the basketball program. I had been coaching a little bit and thought I had something to offer. Didn't know anybody in the basketball office at all. Went a few times, thought they were blowing me off. Eventually, I met Coach K, and much like you, ultimately I became a manager. The difference, I was 28 years old getting an MBA. That in and of itself didn't bother me because I saw the big picture. But when I began to think about my job that I was going to be given, making Gatorade, doing laundry, running film back and forth, doing all those things. The job I had at the bank when I was 17 years old, filing checks, prepared me for what Coach K was going to ask me to do because I already had seen from filing checks how important small beginnings can be to having a big ending. And without me filing those checks properly at age 17, you and I may not be having this conversation, quite honestly. There would have been no Duke basketball. There probably wouldn't be a book. There wouldn't be a speaking career. There probably wouldn't have been any of that because I didn't manage that first thing the right way. And I look back at that. The people who offered me that job saw something in me that I didn't see. And I just did the best I could at it. And I, to this day, some of those people are still living. I thank them whenever I get a chance because that was the beginning of pivoting from someone in high school who wanted to play basketball to being a professional, a businessman, to coaching basketball, to playing wheelchair basketball, to being an All-American at the wheelchair level, something I would have never experienced, all the way to being here today. Um, it's just a testimony of the fact that whatever your gifting is, it's going to surface wherever you are, and you just keep using your gift. You keep using your gift because you don't know what the doors are that are going to be available. But make sure whatever you're doing, do it with all your might, do it to the best of your ability, because you just don't know what the next break is for you. And if I didn't file those checks right, no Duke basketball, no Stanford Express, no Marquette High School, no getting undressed, all of those things.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful for so many different reasons. From, you know, from the, you know, the younger people when they think like, oh, like I'm in the middle of nowhere, like I'm not at a big time school or place. Like it's like you're saying that the thing that led to Duke basketball was filing those checks right.
Yeah.
And I just think like if like Alan Stein calls it the winner's mindset, where he goes, do the best you can with what you have where you are. And that was you doing the best you could with the checks at that point in time. And then it's like, you do that, and then you start thinking like all these doors that open up, like Duke, um, is crazy. And then on the flip side, I think the other really important lesson is for the people that are in leadership positions.
Mm,
Sometimes don't be too quick to write someone off, give them a chance, even if you're starting them small, because you don't know like what they need to do, just to get going, and what doors they may unlock for you or themselves.
that's right. I think as a coach, one of the things I learned is that the 15th player on my team was as valuable to our success as the first player. But it was my responsibility as a coach to let him know what his value was to us and that he was valued. And once he understood that he had a critical part, and that's how I define winning, building a winning culture, is that in doing so, no one's role or responsibility is marginalized. They are all magnified to the same level so that they understand their significance and importance of what we do. And there is nothing that's insignificant. Everything matters. Everything matters. I think we have to get away from trying to pick and choose the points in the game where we want to, turn it on and turn it off. Every moment of every game matters, and we can't take a play off. And so I love Alan Stein's definition. I mean, I just think that's outstanding. When I was in graduate school and the guys would ask me, what do you actually do for Duke? What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm helping us win championships. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, someone's got to get the Gatorade ready. I mean, Grant Hill's thirsty, man. Someone's got to run those loose balls down. I'm helping us win championships. That's what I'm doing. And again, that's reframing how you see it. And that's if you do that repeatedly and do it over and over, it's a practice where you begin to have to see the positive outcome of something before you even get into it. Because if you don't see that, it's hard to stay at it. Honestly, it's just like, I don't think it's going to work out, so I'm not going to do it. And if that's what you see, then that's what you do.
It's funny that you say that, because it reminds me of that story. I can't remember which US president it was, but it's where like it's the same thing, where he was at like NASA, and he asked like a janitor like that was like sweeping the floors, like, what do you do here? And he's like, I'm helping put a man on the moon.
Absolutely.
And I just think like that's such a powerful mindset shift, because it's like, what's the alternative? Like, are you going to be pessimistic and be, oh, I just make the Gatorade? Like,
right.
why not be positive about it? Why not like see the value that you can bring it? And I think it, in your subsection of chapter 6, it says, be intentional about making other people's lives better. Do it on purpose, for purpose.
Mm.
And I think that like that's the job of the leader too, is to find the people where they might be trapped into that thinking, oh, I'm just making the Gatorade, I'm just doing that. And you clearly articulate to them like, no, like if you weren't doing something of value, you wouldn't even be here. So like take pride in what you're doing, because your role matters.
It surely does. And coaches and leaders should be the loudest and most boisterous cheerleaders in the game. They should be the one cheering on the players, cheering on their assistant coaches, letting the whole team know, we got this, we're in this together, let's go, I got your back, don't worry about it. And I have come to understand in business, in basketball, in life, that when people know that you care for them, they will run through the wall for you. I mean, it is amazing to me what just a little bit of attention and being intentional about building relationships with someone and empowering them. That's so important, to empower the people that are working with you. Once you do that, that's what I think separates Coach K from a lot of coaches, is that his ability to identify the bells and the whistles that each player needs for them to be successful. And they know for real that at the end of the day, he cares about them, about their well-being, their overall success, not just how many points they can score, or not if they have a banner hanging in the rafter. That's all great. But what do you do when all that's done? Do you really care about me when I'm done when I'm done doing my thing that helps make you look good? What do you think about me then? And that's a great question.
Yeah, and I think like just you at a younger age when you have to make that shift of being willing to ask for more help, like it shows like kind of your evolution as a leader where you're like, no, I understand that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to empower others. And then whenever you read about all the great leaders, what do? They ask for help. They empower others. And it's that connection that you have with those that are your followers, so to say, or those you lead.
Mhm.
They're the ones that love you the most because of you doing that for them.
Absolutely. And you know what? I haven't always gotten that right as a coach. I think I tell a story in the book where I had an assistant coach who was a great tech X's and O guy, and wanted us to put in a 1-3-1 zone, and I was born and raised man to man, and that was it. Tough, grind it out, guard your guy, and you know our personnel really would fit a 1-3-1. We were long, athletic, could cover a lot of ground. Um, but I didn't know how to teach the 1-3-1. And so I kind of ignored it for a while. And once I kind of came to my senses, I was like, you know what, I think this could actually help us. But I didn't know how to teach it. So I told my assistant coach, I said, look, you know what? Put it in, do your thing. And I'll sit back and I'll learn how to do that. I wish I would have done that earlier. We'd have probably won a few more games. And it's just a lesson on what happens when pride kicks in and your ignorance kicks in at the same time. It prevents you from being as productive and as effective as you can be. And as much as I thought I had already learned that lesson about getting help, I had to be reminded of that again and again and again. And life has a way of bringing you back to the lessons that you already learned.
Yeah, and I mean that's like it's like anything, right? It's about getting your reps in. Like you can't just
Mm,
stop putting your reps in and expect to still be this perfect leader. Like you're gonna have slip ups and like you look at any of the great leaders, so to say, in history, they all have flaws. They're humans. They make mistakes, but like that's the thing. You got to keep after it, and just it's almost like that humility to acknowledge when you do slip up, so you can get back on track.
that's right. That's right. And we're all in the same boat with that. I don't know anybody who doesn't have to, get back up. You're going to get knocked down and you're going to slip, you're going to fall, you're going to do all those things. But it's not, as long as there's time on the clock, you can still impact the game.
Yeah, that's great. So I think like also with your basketball experience as a coach, it's so interesting because you're Power Five level, then you also did the AAU and the high school level. Can you kind of just like maybe like relate from like what you saw back then when you're going through it and kind of how the game's changed now and maybe just gaps in either leadership or development from like for coaches or the student athletes themselves?
Yeah, I started. Timing is so important in terms of the success that you have, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time for a lot of my opportunities. When I look back and I got started back in the late 1980s, early 90s with the AAU team here in Wisconsin, and I was fortunate enough to have some of the greatest players be a part of the program that had some of the greatest players to ever come out of the state of Wisconsin, and the thing that was so um, warm, welcoming, and refreshing is probably the right word about that group of guys, and many in the years to come. They were like sponges in terms of wanting to be coached and wanting to learn and wanting you to teach them. That was just um, it made it made me as a coach feel valuable to them. And that they were like, man, what can you teach us about this? Or what do you think about that? And it was basketball in life. It was basketball in life. And, over time, um, I do think it's interesting. I've changed more than the kids have changed. And I mean, this is what I mean. Um, I don't have the energy I once had. I probably am not up to speed on pop culture the way I was at one point. Um, the kids, the players and student athletes these days, I think they still do some of the things they did 30 years ago. They just have different toys that they do it with. And so I don't know how much they have changed. They've changed some. I think athletically and otherwise, I think there's been some, it's crazy now what young people can do at such early ages. But their minds are still not developed any faster than the mind can be developed. And I think sometimes we forget that. Um, and so I think that as a coach at this point in my life, one of the reasons I'm not coaching is I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I got the energy to run around and chase these high school kids around and do all of that. And then also, I think that we live in a day and age now where the expectations are so different than they were probably 25 or 30 years ago. Um, Everybody is not going to make it to college to play basketball. I didn't even say the NBA. I said college, but the expectations now have changed with summer basketball and AAU, and I love AAU and coached it for years. But the reality of it is everybody that plays in the summertime, they may not make it past high school. I think the climate has changed in regard to that and what the expectations are. I think that student athletes are student athletes. They still need nurturing. They still need correcting. They still need instruction. They still need love. All the things that they've always needed. That hasn't changed, and that will never change. We have the responsibility of 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 taking them from being young men or young women to young adult men and young adult women. That hasn't changed. That will never change. It's how we do it and how much we are now able to relate to the generation that is standing before us. That is so important. If you don't have a connection or you can't make that connection, you probably need to get out of the way and let someone else come in and touch this generation.
Yeah, that's really interesting because that's just really hitting on like self-awareness on your end, like because in a way you're showing your leadership there by understanding, hey, like I'm not going to be able to serve them at the fullest and what they need from me, so I'm going to let someone else come in and do it. So that I think is really admirable. And I just think like it's tough to be able to, like we say, oh, kids have changed and all that. I think you're right, spot on with the expectations,
Mhm.
where everybody that plays in the summer thinks they're going to go to the NBA.
Right.
um, and so I think maybe it's the parenting that has changed a little
Mhm.
more than the way the kids have, and the just the technology that they have access to has definitely evolved over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think parenting has changed. I think information without wisdom and knowledge is out there for everyone to get. The whole social media aspect of it, which has positive benefits, but also you have to have wisdom in how you use those things. And so, absolutely, I do think that all of those things combined, and there's nothing wrong with wanting your son or daughter to be successful. If you're a parent, if you don't think that way, then I think something's wrong with you. But to be realistic and to understand what their abilities are is part of being a parent, it's part of being a leader, it's part of being a coach. A successful coach will properly discern talent and put that talent in the best position to be successful. And that's what parents should do also. Discern the ability, discern the talent, and find out where they will maximize that. And when they do that, everybody wins in that family. And so it's interesting. We talk about leadership and coaching, and I think we all, once we reach a certain place in our lives, become coaches, become leaders, and we either become good ones or bad ones.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because at a coaching clinic, one of the things that I heard that really stood out, because it was the first time I had heard it, where as a Division I head coach, and he said that what he does for his own coaching development is he takes parenting classes. And so I think it's really interesting, because like the whole, like, whether you're a teacher, a coach, a parent, like there's so much overlap between all those areas, and it's like you can't just, I want the best for my kid, so I'm going to be a good leader, but I'm not going to apply that to my parenting. Like it's got to be congruent all around.
Wow, that's a great. I've never heard that statement before, and I think that's wisdom, though. If learning what the other person does before you begin to analyze what they do will make a difference on how you see it. I used to tell my, I had infamous parent meetings when I was the head coach at Marquette High School, and I would meet with my parents, and there were two things I would tell them. One, your son will get 2 minutes of playing time between now and the end of the season. I can guarantee you that. And then secondly, I'll stay out of your living room if you stay out of my gym. And what do you mean? That's what, it's not fair for me to evaluate you as a parent based on the 2 hours I spend with your son every day. And it's not fair for you to evaluate me as a coach based on what you see in a game once a week. And you know what? We had a pretty good relationship after that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always interesting to see those, parenting and coaching dynamics play out, because, every year can be kind of a little bit different. But let's dive into, the building a winning culture, and just the process of it, because I always think it's funny every March when the new hiring cycle goes through at the college level, and then they clip out every single coach that mentions the word culture in the press conferences. But take us through how intentional you have to be, and how long it actually takes to get your program to what you envision it to be.
Well, culture is as much about the things that you do as it is the things you don't do. And I think a lot of times you have to establish standards. That's the first thing you have to do, is come in with some standards, and you don't lower your standard. You keep your standard there, because that becomes the foundation of your culture. Here's how we do this. Here's how we do that. But we don't do that here. We don't do that here. But this is what we do here. And I think culture is something that is passed down, and it's good when you, even in high school, when you bring in a sophomore to the varsity and the seniors can tell them, this is, oh, no, we're not going to do that. You got to make sure you do this. And we got to make sure we do that. And this is how we say it. This is what we do. I think sometime in basketball, we used to teach three things for us, offense, defense, and communication. And the communication piece was really more about culture than anything. What language do we use? How will I reward the behavior that I like? And how do I make clear what's unacceptable? How do I deconstruct and reconstruct at the same time? How can I be demanding without being demeaning? How can I make my janitor, who comes in when practice is over and they sweep the floor and get it ready the next day, how do I make them a part of my program? How do I get them to speak positively about what we're doing? What about the 15th player who's not going to get any time? Does he or she have a different responsibility in this culture thing than someone else? No. The expectation is the same. So it's not all the time about wins and losses, but it is about developing winning habits and doing things with excellence at all times. There's a certain amount of class that goes with culture. We always talk about win with class, lose with class. Well, let's just live with class. That was one of the things to tell my players. I need you to be a good citizen. I need you to be a good teammate, but I need you to be a good citizen. I need for you to live with class out there because you represent us. How long does that take to build? As long as it takes to get the right people to have it instilled in them. Because once you've got a group that is bought in, then they can take that and they begin to share and spread the culture for you. I also think that part of that winning culture or building a culture um, is how you interact with the outside world. You know, your culture, yes, it's great to have a culture inside the gym, but when you step outside the gym, does that culture still exist within your players? I think the answer should be yes. How long does it take? I don't know. Um, depends on how much you have to build. You know, I went into some situations that had losing cultures in terms of wins and losses, but the overall atmosphere was pretty good. They just didn't know how to win. They didn't know how to fight through. They didn't know how to get to that next level. And again, coaches can do that in practice and other things and different drills and skill work that takes them to that next level that gets them there too. Make no mistake about it. Winning does help your culture. I don't care what anybody says. I've had winless seasons, and that is not fun. That's difficult. But if you can get through those seasons and find ways to get a win in the middle of a loss, that's when you know you got culture. That's when the guys buy in or the gals buy in, and we didn't win today, but you know what we did? We did this better this time than we did last time. That's when you have culture.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you there. Where winning does cure a bunch of things that maybe if you haven't won yet, things kind of spiral out of control. But yeah, I think you just hit it on the head where like you just have to be intentional all the time, especially early on, because if you have one slip up, you know, that's where players are gonna be like, oh wait, but you did this, coach, or you said this, and it's like you just like that's where it's truly an art in a way of
Yes.
being a coach
Mm-hmm.
because it's like every word that comes out of your mouth, it's like you got to run it through your personal, like, does this fit in with my culture test? And then you're like, in the moment, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of, checking things out before I say anything.
Well, it's just like a teacher in a classroom. When you're a new teacher, you come to school and these kids don't know who you are. You can't be screwing around. You need to have your stuff ready and know what you're going to do and hold them to it. You can always lighten up if you need to, but you got to stick to it. And coaching, the classroom for coaches is the gym. That's where we do our teaching. That's where we do our education is in that gym. And that's why you have to just you said be intentional. You got to be intentional and you've got to be persistent. And you just got to keep going at it. You never it's interesting. Um, ethnic culture is always evolving. It never stops being. It's always going. The African American culture, the Irish culture, the German culture, it keeps going. And that's what your culture as a basketball coach and as a program, that's what you want. You want perpetuity. Even after your players leave and you get new ones in, they're like, oh yeah, we know yeah, this is what we do here. And that's when you get it really good.
Yeah, I like that. Because it's like, culture is a living organism and it's always evolving. So make sure it's evolving in the right
Right
direction,
direction.
not not the other way.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So next thing is you have here your ability will get you there, your character will keep you there, and it will stay with others long after you're gone. And that kind of gets into the legacy piece of being a coach, being a leader. Could you kind of go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think people will remember who you are more than what you did. And that's just what I believe. They'll remember the things that you did, but they'll remember you more as a person. And when that time comes for people to honor you and reflect on who you are, it is your character that stays with them well past when you stopped coaching or when you stopped being a CEO. They're going to talk about your character. And I think that we all um, leave a legacy of some sort, whether we intentionally try to create it or we don't. There is a legacy. And um, I think for me, I want to make sure that after I've been somewhere, I want it to be a better place than when before I got there, if that makes sense. I want the people that I interacted with to be better people, to be a better person, better player than they were before they met me. Um, I want the business that I'm consulting or the executive that I'm coaching to be a better executive, or the business to be more productive after I've been there. And that to me is really what drives what I do now. You know, I left the coaching ranks in 2018, I believe, was the last year I was an assistant coach at Concordia University here in Mequon, Wisconsin. And I left because I wrote the book and I was going to go full time on the speaking circuit. And I'm very pleased with what I've done in the game of basketball and what the game has done for me. Um, you know, from the playgrounds of Milwaukee to Cameron Indoor Stadium to overseas, representing the U.S. with Guy Rancourt and Frank Martin. Um, the game's been really good to me, but I've been good to the game. And I wanted to make sure I left something tangible that people could talk about in young people that they could share with their children and their grandchildren and their friends about their experience that they had with Coach Cooks. Oh man, remember when we did this? Remember when we did that? And man, he was a good guy. I mean, he was tough on us, but he was a good guy. And so um, that to me is what drives everything I've always done, is to impact other people's lives. And now I get to do it a little less than we did before the pandemic, speaking, but it's coming back and doing more things virtual and through the book, you know, just wanting it to impact people. And that's a legacy in and of itself. I know that you're going to have a book one day. I know you will. And I tell people it is forever in the Library of Congress, and somebody will always be able to read and grow from that. And so you need ability to get in, but your character to keep you there. And when you're done and you leave that place, your character will be on each person that you touched along the way.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like how you leave it kind of open with like, regardless of what you do, like you're going to be leaving a legacy. So like be intentional and choose to to leave a good one. Be mindful of how you're treating others. Cause I always think back to my playing days, right? Like I couldn't tell you a single record. Like I could guess like, hey, I think we were the, but it's like I could tell you about all the fun times on bus trips, or you know when coach was being funny, you know, different pranks we used to do with the guys. Like those are what you remember, and those relationships. So I really like that. But okay, so whether it's coach wanting to do a team read with their program, or it's just a staff and coaching development, or even the business side of it, where can people find you and hit you up for the book and all the things that you do?
Okay. If you're interested in a signed copy of the book, you can go to my website, which is davidcooksspeaks.com. And there you can order a signed copy. The book's also available on Amazon. You can also, if you wanted me to come and speak to your team or to your business or whatever, again, my website's available, but I'm also on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is at DCE Speaks. And those are the primary ways to get a hold of me. And I, am honored to have been here with you today. This is a lot of fun. And, I know that this is going to be a great series for you.
Awesome. Well, I'm honored you came on. I love your story, and you know how you pivoted and what you did with it, and how you're, you know, using it to inspire others. And it's just, the book is packed with so many different leadership principles and lessons that you can take away from. So I definitely think You know, it just makes sense, right? It's basketball themed, like basketball coaches and all that can benefit from reading it. So really, really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you.